Right then, so we're just about ready to go. What I've done so far, I've just got some sponge, quite a close, not very porous, the sort of makeup sponges here that I have. You can buy these in big blocks of them, and then you can just cut them to any shape. So what I've done, I've done a couple of squares and just filled up the intakes with them and pushed them in up to the white. Now by gently prodding them and using a flat edge perhaps of your knife as well, you can get them in there and get them to line up, and it gives that nice mask area as you go round. You can sharpen it up afterwards if you want to do with a bit of masking tape, but it just stops all that overspray going down and in. So we've got to do the same for obviously these gear wells. Normally what I actually do, as you've seen in the other videos, I use the doors. I like to use the doors on there as it would, because then when you go through the weathering process it can all be done at the same time. The way that the doors fit on this one, because you actually have I'll show you one here on the sprue, it's actually got the entire door. You see I've sprayed the inside part white, but you've got the inner side of the well is attached to the door, so it's just as easy to do it separate. So what we're going to do, we use these bits of foam and we're just going to bung up the actual wheel wells themselves so we don't get any overspray in there. Now the best thing to do is actually push it all the way down and get it in there, and then you can actually tease it back to the surface by just pulling the middle and squashing down, and it sort of folds up, and as long as it's not overhanging over your paintwork you'll be fine. The nice thing with foam is obviously it conforms to the shape that you need, filling that hole fully. The other way of doing that, I actually do it, is with a bit of blue tack or sort of silly putty type thing. Pop it in there, mould it all round to the outside. Other times, if you're talking a big area, perhaps you can stuff it with a bit of tissue and then with blue tack on top, or as you say, use large bits of foam. Because it's just got acrylic paint on it, afterwards these are still quite pliable, so you can just reuse them and reuse them, and I've got some of them, I've used lots and lots of times. So we'll just carry on with these. We obviously have got to do these wells. If you measure it sort of roughly, and say, because it's a close sort of a porous, not very porous sort of foam, you can just pop them in and see how they fit. So if we just do this, I'm just going to take this sort of edge off here a little bit. And as you can see, they fit in there quite nicely, quite well. Obviously if you do go over the top and you do get it wrong afterwards, you can just pop round with a little bit of white paint. But this way it's a nice quick easy way of doing it. Okay, so we're now over at the spray bay. We're going to be now priming it, as we do with all our models. Usual thing, any bit of acrylic primer I've got around. I've got a bit of X20A, which is Tamiya. So as I say, you could use a proper primer, but I tend to just use what I've got a lot of lying around at that time. So all we're going to do is we're going to do a 50-50 spray, quite a bit of it. So we're just doing 50% thinners to 50% paint. We'll give that a bit of a stir. Now remember, you've been round, checked everywhere to make sure everything's okay. And then this particular coat, as I said before, is going to be sort of your check. You can see if there's any lines that are wrong or big gaps or things you're generally unhappy with. So don't panic if it looks awful, because this is the point where you can put it right. If it's all primed and looks all okay and nice, then you can move on to your next stage, and away you go. So I'll just put the compressor on. Okay, we just check our flow. Okay, we're all happy with that. And then nice dusty coats. I always seem to start on the bottom. Quite high air pressure. And we're just going to prime the entire model. As I say, my first pass I just do these little dusty type things going on. And then afterwards, like that, then afterwards you sort of come in and you get going with your paint. And you can lay down thicker colours as you go. Just like that. one thing to talk about as we're in here, got a new type of little nib thing on the end. Now this is with the Hardler and Steinbach ones. Now the thing is, this one's quite nice because it just has two little prongs which come out like that. So with this you can swipe it off just like the end of your needle, and it's sort of that right shape, so no longer do you have to worry about sort of build up, because you can just pull it across and it's nice little clean. Now if your airbrush doesn't come with this and you are using their airbrushes, the H&S airbrushes, then you can actually just buy this new cap that goes over the top. You will need the entire front nozzle replacement because the other ones is sort of thread they screw on. These just slide right over the top. So you will have to, you know, invest a few pounds, which they are literally about sort of £15 for a new top. But if you're going to buy a new needle set, just buy these new ones, and they're not threaded on, they literally just slide on. The way you tell is this outer ring for the actual cap itself, the needle cap, it's got like castle, it's a castle top instead of being smooth like the others. So we'll just carry on. What I'll tend to do is I'll just do the back half like this, then we can flip over and do the other side. And those areas where we were worried about, like the join on this wing, this is the bit where you can actually see how good a join that actually is. Remember, every now and again cut to air and you can see what you're doing. So if you look at that join there on that wing, it's not noticeable at all, which is quite nice. But if it was, we could now go back and take care of that. And there we go, that's our first cupful used. Okay, so here we have the all done. Now I've had a good look around it. Very happy with the way it's all came out. There's no obvious signs of joins and other bits and pieces. So I'm very happy with all of that. So what we're going to do now is pre-shade. Now there's video tutorials on this all over the place, so I'll just whip through it. Basically, flat black on top, following all the big panel lines. Now obviously if you're doing something big, like a heavy duty join, or certainly on certain aircraft, some where the engines are removed in, then obviously they're going to be very dirty, and obviously you put a thicker black line. Little small areas, very fine panel lines, you do it with little areas. So we just give a drop of this. Just a few drops in the corner. Now I've changed airbrushes. This one has got the 0.2 needle set in it. It's just that this one gives me a little bit more control over the other airbrush, but you could do it with the other airbrush. So basically, as we said before, I always tend to start on the big areas, so things like ailerons, flaps, things like that, they tend to get quite a bit. And we'll work all the way around the model, doing all the lines as we go. pre-shading done. Okay, so now we're on with the dark gunship grey. In this case we're going to actually be using the Model Air number 053, which is put down as dark sea green, but it is actually the match for gunship grey. Now, because we're going to be going over pre-shading, normally the Valero Model Air, the black top ones, are ready to use straight on your model. Because we're going to be going over the pre-shading, I thinned it a little bit. There's probably about sort of 10% thinners in there to make sure it's all going to show through. I'm actually using the 0.2 needle in this airbrush, and also at the back here I've actually got a clamp just so it's easier to hold when we're manoeuvring round. So with ever, when I'm spraying, I'll start on the bottom. Because it's primed, we can go straight into paint. There we go. And remember, the pre-shading will come back through once it's dried a bit. So if we just do that wing, just like that, and then if I just cut to air and dry it off, you can see the pre-shading just peeking through there again, and that's it. So we're going to keep it quite light, because what we're going to do, because obviously gunship grey is quite a plain boring colour, to give it some sort of variations and tonal differences, I'm going to go around and lighten up the panels here and there. So what we'll do, obviously we don't have to go right round everywhere around these rear areas, because they're sort of the metal, which we'll do after we've sprayed. Remembering to get in amongst all these pylons. Sometimes you'll do a model like the wing pylons. Obviously I haven't attached now, they've gone afterwards, but you know, it's easier to spray them afterwards around those pylons and things like that. But for the moment we're just going to carry on and just get some air in the compressor. Obviously we've got to do inside these air intakes as well, and we don't want to be blasting in there at a high PSI. We just want to keep it nice, light, dusty painting in there. Remember, every now and again, go down onto your paper towel, blast it all through to kick off any build-up that you might be getting. Also, I'm not worried about the nose, because the nose, looking at the references on this particular aircraft, is a little bit lighter. So we'll mask that up and spray it a little bit lighter. We'll do it the same as we're going to be doing the centre panels, so we can kill two birds with one stone there. Just remember with your pre-shading not to go in there really heavy, because obviously you're going to lose it. All that work you've done, you know, you're not going to see it if you put too much paint on. So keep your paint quite thin and nice light coats and build it up. If it's looking too dark, you then can go back over it and spray it again, versus if it's, you know, you've got overdone it, then you're going to have to think about lightening it up, moving away from that area. Then afterwards you could always post-shade it, which basically means spraying it afterwards, or you could just finish it off spraying, give it some black over those areas again, and then try it again. Obviously we'll just do this bit in the middle down here, because that one's a different colour. There we go. So we just flip it over. We can do the top half. As you see, I haven't got the top of the speed brake on because that's going to be a different colour. That's going to have to be sprayed orange for the tiger stripes. Just running out of paint there. So just dry that off as we go. And what we can do is we can just stand that on its nose for a moment, up against like that, and we'll just fill up the airbrush and carry on. And there we go, that's that one on now. All looking pretty nice. Both sides. So we're just going to let that dry for a few moments. Literally going to give that a few minutes just to dry off. And then we can move on to spraying obviously the other bits. We've still got tail planes to do, which I've got here. And then obviously we've got fuel tanks, various bits and pieces. They can all be sprayed now, and then we're going to go back afterwards and touch in the little areas. We're going to pick out some panels to work with the pre-shading. So okay, here we are. It's all dried, been dried about half an hour, and as you can see we've got these nice panel lines. Now I brought it back over to the bench and got my old cutting mat because obviously there isn't a great deal of spraying here. But as you can see, the pre-shading gives it that sort of you know, the darker shadow. It's like a shadowing effect, if you like. Now, to bring that right out to life, what we're going to actually do, you get pre-shading and you get post-shading, and then I call this bleaching. Obviously, if it had just come out of the factory, it would be that type of colour, no problem over. But over time, obviously, the paint lightens. Now, not to get confused with US Navy aircraft, obviously where you get what we call corrosion control, well, that's those real heavy dirt, looks like dirt colours. Well, actually that's fresh paint going on to where there's obviously where you get joins, things like that, and it just stops salt build up and obviously eating into the metal. And obviously US Navy, US Air Force aircraft don't have that, so they tend to be more evenly weathered. So what we're going to do, we're going to take the gunship grey we're using and a few drops of white. So we've got the compressor all brought over here. So all we're going to do, good shake with both first. For this one I'm going to use this airbrush. You'll notice I tend to switch between the two for various jobs. A lot of it is just depends on what needle they've actually got in there at that time is to the reason I'll use it. So when we go, just a few drops because we're going to be going tons everywhere with this. Okay, then we're going to take our white and we're going to add 3 drops of white into that mix. Now, excuse me a moment. There we go. Sorry, everything's on the other side of the room in the spray bay. So what we're going to do is we just lighten that a touch. It says not having this all prepared already. We need some thinners. Okay, and then all we'll do is we're going to thin this quite heavily because don't forget this is pre-thinned paint quite a bit. Obviously the thinner the paint is, the lighter it will be as well. But that's 3 drops, so we'll probably cut that by about 25%, added about 25% white to that. Now this may look a little light, but it's going to have a wash afterwards. Now the wash will darken the area as well, so don't panic too much if this is too light. We're going to do the nose with it as well, the same colour. Sometimes they get darker, sometimes they get lighter. They have a special paint that's almost like a rubbery texture for the radar to travel through easier. They tend to get dirty very, very quickly. Now the nose on the F-15, the mud version if you like, which is the strike version, is interchangeable with the actual, what we call the albino, which are the fighter version, the C version. And sometimes they have each other's nose, and that's why they weather quite differently. So what we do, remember this is quite a runny mix, but quite a high air pressure. Now if we start on the top here, all we're going to do is pick out those centre panels. quite large areas. So we're just picking them out and giving my favourite word, which is a bit of tonal variation. And I don't know if you can see that. There we go. So it's just like that. So it's actually making it stand out a lot more. And then all you do, if you like, if you can see where your pre-shading is, you can see where your pre-shading is. Obviously we want to not go near that. You're sort of putting it in that spot. And there we go, so we're going to run all around the model, giving it this look. And as I say, it will darken down with the weathering that we're going to do afterwards, but for the moment it will give you that sort of nice tonal difference so you can see it all standing out. Okay, so there we go. That's all done. As I say, this isn't going to be particularly heavily worn, and that will all blend in with the wash later on. But that gives you a good idea of how we sort of get that shady effect. So obviously you've got the pre-shading working there with sort of some post-shading for the centre panels. As you saw, I've done these as well, which are the tail planes ready to go on. So all we've got to do now is take care of this nose. So what we'll actually do for that, we're going to get some 6mm Tamiya tape here, and we're just going to loop it around the nose, mask the back, spray it a lighter colour. That will give us our tonal difference we were talking about from the difference there, and then we can then let that dry for a good couple of hours, make sure it's all finished, and then we can mask it up for the metal areas. So we just mask this. So you're running the tape down. Remember, as we were saying with like masking canopies, you sort of do it in sections as you go, because obviously the top half here is the more tricky, so it's that sort of pull and crimp business. There we go. Just this last section. There we go, just round like that. And then we'll just take some bigger stuff, bit of 10mm, or was this 18 in this case, just round, just like that. And then all we can do, how much paint we've got, but we can just blow this area in. Like so. Just cut to wear and just dry that off a bit. And then hopefully, if all goes well, sit there. A bit carefully, obviously I would leave this a few moments normally to dry. But we'll just whip this off. Remember with acrylics, try when you're getting things off to drag it through the tape rather than anywhere else, because you might scratch it. But there we go. Use the birdie. Right, there we have it. All painted. Little bit of weathering. Say it looks too heavy at the moment, but trust me, it'll all blend in quite nicely with the wash. So say, going to leave this for a couple of hours, go and have some lunch, come back, and we're going to get these metal areas all finished